I use 44 markdown files in one folder, and that's my entire AI operating system. Now, I've been building inside Claude Code full-time for about a year now, and on day one, I made one single decision that mattered more than anything else, because I went straight to plain markdown files in a folder. And markdown is just another word for a text file. And I don't use any skills or subagents or hooks. I just use text files, and after 44 of those files, the reason that decision mattered is pretty obvious, and it's the opposite of what the AI productivity crowd is telling you. This week alone, Anthropic released another Claude Code update. More developer tools, more features, but it's the exact same pattern that it's always been. More packaging stacked on top of the same building blocks. What I didn't realize when I started is I'd actually built something fractal. One file at the top opens the right files underneath it, and each of those opens more files below. Each file pulled in the next one on its own. And once I saw that shape, I never touched a skill or a subagent again. Now, if you've been confused about which of Anthropic's features to use and when to use them, stick around to the end of the video because I'm going to show you one rule that I wrote that turned out to be the most important thing in this entire system. It runs once a month when I sit down to journal, and it's changed how I think about every decision that I make. So Anthropic released a feature 2 weeks back that does just a tiny part of what this rule does. And I'll tell you what they got right and what they missed. Anthropic keeps releasing new ways to organize your work with AI. Almost every month, there's a new feature for telling Claude how to behave. I'm going to describe each one because the marketing makes them sound way more different than they actually are. The first one is skills. Now, a skill is just a folder, and inside that folder is one main file written in Markdown. The file opens with a name and a short description telling Claude when to use it. And below that, there's the actual instructions in plain English. The folder can hold other reference files too, and Claude can read them when it needs to. So when Claude sees a task that matches the description on the first line, it loads the file and follows what's inside. That's the entire thing. Now, the second one is subagents, and a subagent is a single markdown file. It describes what the subagent specializes in, which tools it can use, and the instructions that it follows. So when Claude decides that a task should go to a specialist, it spins up a fresh copy of itself loaded with that subagent's instructions. And it works the task off to the side and comes back with one answer. Now, the third thing is the CLAUDE.md file. This is a markdown file at the top of your project. Claude reads it automatically at the start of every single session. And all of your project-wide context goes in this file, like coding conventions or anything that applies no matter which task you're on. Now, the fourth and last one is hooks. And hooks work a little bit differently. They're small command line scripts that you set up in a settings file that fire automatically when specific events happen. And they control the behavior, but not the content itself. So every one of these was launched as the way to tell Claude how to behave. And every time a new one drops, anyone doing real work with Claude has to stop and figure out which one to use and when to use it and what to use it for. If you were to go search for skills versus subagents right now, you're going to find 100 different articles trying to explain the difference. And one will tell you to stop stuffing everything inside of Claude.md. And the next one tells you that you don't even need a Claude.md. And it's a mess. And to be honest, I get the confusion because I've tried all of them myself, but what I'm about to show you is going to feel obvious once you see it. Because skills are markdown files, subagents are markdown files, and Claude.md is a markdown file. All three are just instructions that Claude reads at different moments. The only real differences are the folders that they live in and the rule about when they get loaded and the marketing language that Anthropic wraps around them. Hooks are a little bit different because those are command line scripts triggered by events, not actual instructions. But they sit in the same overall stack, and I'll come back to that in a little bit. Here's the part that actually matters because skills, subagents, and Claude.md are all markdown underneath. Your entire AI operating system can be plain text files in a folder that you own. You don't need proprietary structures or Anthropic-specific frameworks. Whatever you build inside a skill or a subagent, you can actually build with the same markdown file in your own folder, and it'll work in any AI coding tool that reads files. That's the part Anthropic doesn't lead with. Because once you see all three as the same kind of thing, you start asking a better question. Like, why am I keeping them in 3 different folders, each with its own loading rules and its own ways to break? Why not put all of it in one folder, give every file a simple name, and let one master file decide which one to load and when? So that's exactly what I did, and that's how I ended up with 44 markdown files in one folder with one master file pointing at all of them. Now, the people who design skills and subagents and hooks and Claude.md are going to tell you that the different categories matter. They'll say that the layered system is more powerful, and they'll write whole articles about using the right tool for the right job. But I'm going to push back on that a little bit, because when your instructions are scattered across 4 different mechanisms, you've got 4 different places where things can break. And each one has its own loading rules that you have to keep straight while you're trying to get work done. And in real use, like real day-to-day use, the layering itself is what makes the system unreliable. I'd write a skill for one task, and I'd build a subagent for another task, and I'd drop some rules into CLAUDE.md. Then a month later, I'd open that project and I'd try to use it, and I couldn't remember which file did what, or I'd update one place and forget to update another, and Claude would behave inconsistently because the instructions in different files were fighting each other, which is fragile by design. The way I actually figured this out came out of my journaling. This entire project kind of started because I wanted to do conversational journaling with AI. I prefer talking to typing because it's way faster, and I wanted to sit down in the morning, speak my thoughts out loud, and have Claude help me make sense of them. So I wrote one markdown file, a simple rule that said, when I say journal, walk me through a morning session. And it was 3 steps, that's it. Then I'd journal, and I'd maybe notice that something was missing, so I'd edit the rules file, add a step that pulls my health data off my Garmin watch, or I would add a step that asks about yesterday, or maybe I'd add a step that writes the plan for the day into the right folder. And every session, the rule got a little bit smarter because I was learning what I actually needed by doing it. So a few months in, I opened that journal rule to make another edit, and I saw something that I hadn't noticed before, which was that the rule had turned into a map. It pointed at my health documents, like from my watch, yesterday's entry, my goals folder, my fitness state file, my training plan, and that one journal rule had quietly grown into an index referencing a whole bunch of other markdown files. And every one of those files pointed at more files below it. And that was the moment when I kind of realized that this journal rule was actually a fractal index. One file at the top of a tree that's kind of branching down into the rest of my system, picking up only what the current task needed. And once I saw this pattern in my journaling, I started to see it everywhere. In the Let's Work rule, the Lint Vault rule, the Make a Video rule, all doing the exact same thing, and none of them were skills or subagents in any way that mattered. All of them were just markdown files pointing at the right places of my second brain at the right moment. And once I saw that, the architecture was obvious. One folder, one master file, a list of trigger phrases, each one opening the right markdown file at the right moment. And after 44 of these files, the structure was finally settled. One folder, one master file, one trigger phrase per file. And here's what surprised me the most once I made the switch. The system actually got way more reliable because everything lives in one place now, with one mental model and one set of rules. If something breaks, I know exactly where to look. Adding a new task is just one new file plus one line in the master file. Changing how Claude handles a task is editing one file instead of 3 now. It's super boring, but it just works. So let me show you what this actually looks like in the day-to-day, because I know this can be a little bit abstract. So every morning, I sit down at my desk and I open Claude Code. One word fires the entire sequence, and that word is journal. I speak that word through TypeTalk. It runs locally on my machine and transcribes straight into whatever app I have open. The local processing on my computer is instant, and the text appears as I'm talking. And there's no subscription. Every other voice-to-text tool out there charges you monthly forever, and this one just sits on your computer, you buy it once, it's yours forever with unlimited usage. Link is down below in the description. Claude sees the word journal, looks at the master file, finds the line that says, when Eric says journal, read the journal rule. It opens it, and that rule walks Claude through a 25-minute structured session that runs the same way every single morning. It pulls my health data off my watch here. It briefs me on how I slept and how my body's recovering. It asks me about last night. It writes today's plan to the right folder, and it locks in the day with a clear set of priorities. And there's no setup on my part and no decision about which AI feature to invoke. I just say the word journal. And later in the day, I say, let's work. And it's the exact same mechanism, but a different rule. So Claude reads the work session rule, checks my to-do list, asks about my priorities, runs a procrastination diagnostic if I seem stuck, and it gets me to the right block of work. I'll tell you one more of these because this one kind of surprised me the most when I built it. There's a rule called Lint Vault. Lint is just a software term that means cleaning up junk. So when I say the phrase, Claude reads through every rule in my system and every cross-reference between them, then flags anything that's drifted like stale files, broken links, or contradictions, or anything that looks out of date, and the system audits itself on demand with one spoken phrase. So that's the entire system. One folder, a master file at the top, one trigger phrase per file, with none of the layered architecture I got sold on originally. And the crazy part is that I'm not actually doing anything that Anthropic doesn't already recommend. CLAUDE.md is a real feature. Triggering rule files based on context is something that the system already supports. And I'm just using the most basic building blocks that they offer and skipping all of the new packaging that they keep stacking on top of it. Because what actually makes this work is the way that the files connect to each other. The folder is just where the files live. When my master file points to a rule, that rule isn't the end of the chain. The rule itself can point at other things like a specific document somewhere else in my system, or a folder index, or another rule. So when I say journal in the morning, Claude doesn't load my whole second brain. It loads the master file. It finds the line that says journal. It opens the journal rule. The journal rule then pulls in only what the morning session needs, like health documents, yesterday's entry, goals, fitness state, training plan, and everything else in the vault stays untouched. This is the part that most AI setups get wrong in one of two directions. Some people dump everything into Claude's memory all at once, which clogs the model up and ends up confusing it, and you end up getting context poisoning and all that kind of stuff. Others fragment into instructions so badly that the AI can't actually find what it needs, and it keeps asking the same questions over and over again. What I built here sits kind of in between those two. There's one entry point. Each file knows what it depends on and pulls those in only. And Claude walks the tree only as deep as the current task actually needs. That's why my version is faster and more reliable and doesn't get confused halfway through a task. The hierarchy itself is doing the work that the layered system was supposed to do in the first place, and it's pretty cool to watch this thing work, because it's just markdown files pointing at other markdown files in a clean tree. You don't need a fancy framework for any of this. Master file at the top, a folder of rules in the middle, and clean cross-references between them. And that's the entire job. The trap that I fell into is the same one that most people are falling into right now, because every time Anthropic releases a new feature, the instinct is to ask, okay, where does this fit into my setup? The marketing pushes you to layer the new thing on top of what you've already got, and 2 months later, you've built a complicated, fragile system that you don't really understand anymore. Last week is a perfect example. Anthropic launched a new product aimed at business owners called Claude for Small Business, and it's a package of 15 skills with built-in connectors to QuickBooks, PayPal, HubSpot, Canva, DocuSign, and a bunch of other tools that small businesses actually use. And it's going to be genuinely useful for a lot of people, but every single one of those 15 skills inside it is still a markdown file with a description telling Claude when to load it. Same kind of file as the ones in my folder. The only difference is that Anthropic's version lives inside of their ecosystem, and that's the real cost that nobody's naming, because if your whole setup is built on skills and subagents and Anthropic-specific features, you're stuck the day that Anthropic changes their pricing or retires a model or ships a policy that you don't like. And migrating is painful, but plain markdown files in a folder work in Claude Code today, they work in Codex tomorrow, and they'll work in Gemini CLI the day after that, because every AI coding tool reads Markdown. If I wanted to switch off Claude Code tomorrow morning and use Codex instead, I could move my entire 44 rule folder over, and everything would still work perfectly because it's decentralized. And that's the whole reason I built it this way from day one, because I actually own it. So when a new feature launches, ask one question: can I do this with a plain markdown file and an instruction to read it at the right time? And if the answer is yes, just skip that feature. Because for most of you, that means Claude.md plus a folder of rule files is genuinely enough. Skills and subagents are all optional for what most of you are doing. What you actually need is clear instructions in one place, named so you can find them, and a way for Claude to know when to read them. Anything past that is just overhead that you don't need. So that rule that I mentioned at the start of this video, that one that runs once a month and changed how I think about every decision I make, it's called the decision audit. And on the first of every month, when I run my morning journal, the journal rule fires the decision audit automatically. And this audit reads back through every major decision that I logged in the last 30 days. Each entry has a slot at the bottom for the verdict, and either the decision held, it got reversed, or it got replaced by a later one. The audit walks me through them one at a time and asks how each one actually played out compared to what I predicted, and writes the verdict into the file. Then it analyzes the patterns, like which kind of decisions held up, or which ones I reversed 3 weeks later, or where I'm consistently overconfident, or where I'm too cautious. And I've learned more from that one rule once a month than I have from any business book I've read in the last 5 years, graded against what actually happened. And it's a markdown file in a folder with a phrase that runs it. Same building block as everything else. That's the move. And that's why the boring version wins. So 3 things to take away. 1, Skills, Subagent, and CLAUDE.md are all markdown files with different rules about when they load. The marketing makes them sound different. The substance is the same. Fragility is only half of the problem. The layered design is also vendor lock-in, and the more you build inside Anthropic-specific features, the harder it is to take your work anywhere else. Plain markdown in one folder doesn't have that problem. And 3, the boring version wins because it's portable. A folder of plain markdown files works in Claude Code, or Codex, or Gemini CLI, or any agentic AI you want to use in the future. You own it, and nobody's ecosystem owns you. So if you're running Claude Code or any AI agent system right now, you're probably feeling the layered system pain that I just described. And the decision audit rule that I'm walking through in the next video is one of the highest leverage things you can add to any setup, layered or not. And it lives inside the same folder I just showed you. 2 quick things before you go. First, Type Talk again. It works in every app. The text appears instantly because it's running on your machine. No subscription. You buy it once and it's yours. So if you're running an AI operating system like the one I just walked you through, talking to it is roughly 4 times faster than typing. Try it once and you're not going to go back. So the link is in the description for that. And the second is the next video. Click right here to watch the full decision audit breakdown. This is the rule I showed at the start, the one that Anthropic just accidentally validated when they released a feature called Dreaming 2 weeks back. Dreaming does just a fraction of what this rule has been doing for me by hand, and the human version is bigger than the AI one. So click here to watch the video, and I'm going to see you guys in the next one.